Hey, yo, guys, what's up? I want to propose that we really take a glance at what's happening over at DCU, the new DCU. For the first time in forever, we have a DC universe to compete with the MCU. The DCEU, the DC universe of films, worlds of DC, whatever they wanted to call it in the past, is pretty much done and over with. This is the very first time since Zack Snyder that we've had an actual head calling shots-ish for DC. And I say ish is because even though Zack was doing his thing in the beginning, he still had to answer to some people. This time around, with what James Gunn and Peter Safran is doing, is kind of unprecedented for DC. Like, James Gunn is essentially the Kevin Feige of the DCU. He's even branded it DCU to even compete with what the MCU is. I'm asking and calling upon you guys in this video as a call to action to hear me out, and as DC fans to kind of grasp what is actually coming. Jody is all up through this thing up to this point. So many things that have happened that have come to fruition. We really need to do one last thing in order for the DCU to rise and shine. DC rises, as I always said. Let's get up into it.
Gracias por ver la esquina de Jody. Thank you for watching Jody's Corner.
Welcome to Jody's Corner. I'm Jody Joe. Thank you guys so very much for being here. Hit that subscribe button for that real content that I've been preaching, promoting for the longest time. Whoa, for the longest. Woo-hoo. Shout out to Family Guy. All right, but in all seriousness, there's one major thing that I really need us to come to conclusions with. The conclusion that we need to come together with is understanding that the old DC's gone. And what does that mean? Kevin Tsujihara, Walter Hamada, with Ann Sarnoff, Greenblatt, douchebag Jason Kilar, Zack Snyder in the Snyderverse. All of that is gone, and what's happening now is a essential rebirth, a reboot, a restart, a refresh of the DCU, and a rebranding, the DCU. We need to stop the hate. We need to stop the combativeness. We need to stop arguing and bickering and fighting. At this point, it's really about either you're on board with DC moving forward or you're not. Being in the middle is okay, but what happens when you're in the middle in a position like this, you tend to be positive and then sometimes negative. We don't need any negativity because this is the beginning. We need to give James at least a few movies to decide whether he's the one for the future or not, if this DCU is going to work out or not. Superman's going to be a priority in this new universe. Superman's going to be one of the first films to come out, and there's going to be like a couple of obscure films that I believe James is going to come out with Superman, slowly introducing the Justice League. It is my opinion, and this is not from sources of mine or anything like that. It is my opinion that James' 10-year plan is building the Justice League. I believe his 10-year plan is going to be building individual league members as well as obscure C-list and B-list characters into an expanded Justice League of America. So what I'm predicting in 2024 to 2034, by the end of 2034, we will be looking at an established, cohesive Justice League for each individual character that we have grown with, we have seen have camaraderie, we've seen them meet each other, we are going to be ensconced even more, kind of like the Avengers did, but this is going to be, I believe, even more deeper than what Joss Whedon did with the Avengers team from 2008 to 2012. He's going to do this, instead of 2008 to 2012, which is what, 4 to 5 years, James is going to do this over 10 years. Building, introducing, all the way to the end of the 10-year plan, the Justice League. And then the Justice League will have to face foes and face armies and face brainiacs, and the dark sides and stuff could come out. Those big, those big, huge endgame event, Final Crisis, Infinite Crisis, Crisis on Infinite Earths, all that stuff could then introduce itself. But one thing that I really want you guys to understand is that this is the guy. He's the one that's making all the shots. He's the one that put Wonder Woman on the back burner. He's the one that got rid of putting Aquaman out, deleting the Aquaman franchise, $7 Productions, Black Adam's out of there, Henry Cavill Superman's gone. Whether you like it or you don't, you gotta respect that and what I believe is that what he's doing is for the better of DC. And I've always been for the better of DC. During the Snyderverse, I was depressed, and the only shining light and hope was Wonder Woman, was Patty, was Gal. That's all I had to linger on to, and they were the ones that were uplifting some of the heavy load and keeping people relatively interested in DC. Now that they're on the back burner and they're gone, maybe they'll come back in the future. I hope that Patty comes back in the future. I hope Gal comes back in the future. I believe that Gal and Patty will be back for Wonder Woman. I think down the line in a few years, you'll see them again. They're just not going to be out in the first 3, 4, 5, 6 years, I think. So, we should understand that this dude is the boss like never before. People want to say that Zack had ultimate power. His was chaotic power, where DC, where Warner Brothers didn't really have a film division for DC, and they didn't have any control. They just said, you know what, do what Nolan did, make some dark superhero movies and give us some money. That's really what it was, and Zack was doing what he thought was right, which was a fumble in my opinion. Somebody asked him, you know, what do you feel about DC studio getting involved and interfering with production? Because a lot of people complain that Zack, he was interfered with his BVS. That was a 4-hour movie that they made a 2.5-hour movie. They were upset that Zack's Justice League was a 4-hour cut and turned into a 2-hour cut. Studio interference was something that a lot of people who make excuses for Zack say happened, and the reason why most people didn't love the movie. So someone asked him that. If we take a look here, someone says, as long as the studio doesn't override you, James, or your directors at every turn, I, for one, have confidence that you'll actually be making decisions for the DC universe that I can get on board with. He said, in my opinion, it was studio interference that derailed the previous attempt at DCU. It wouldn't surprise me to learn that Mr. Johns was quite frustrated. Mr. Jeff Johns, quite frustrated. Jeff Johns was a guy who was a creative. He was an artist. He was an illustrator. He's a guy who was a very comic book heavy dude, thrust into an executive position, which was out of his comfort zone, but he did rise to the occasion. He did make some really good decisions for the future of DC. A lot of it was snuffed out. And there was a lot of things that happened with Zack, a lot of the micromanaging over Zack because they didn't trust in what he was saying. But like we see here, Gunn made it clear that those director problems that Snyder had, Gunn is at the top of the food chain. Read this. Look at this. James is flexing. The position is different than it was with Zack. Peter and I are the heads of DC Studios. The only studio interference would be from us. This is huge, ladies and gentlemen. This is basically saying, he's basically calling out the power that Zack Snyder did not have. He's basically saying, oh my bad, Bishop. He's basically saying that Zack was not of almighty power. Zack didn't have that power to stop the studio interference, which he didn't, because a lot of people complain BVS and Justice League was heavily interfered by the studio. Well, James is like, I am the studio. This is DCU, DC Studios. It's a new branding, and they're at the top of the food chain. So I want you guys to know that Ultimate Power, for the first time, truly the first time Ultimate Power for DC is here with James Gunn and Peter Safran. Knowing that we see where it's at, who's in power, who's not, we need to give James a 3 to 4 year slate of just time to get his thoughts off. Get those movies out, get those scripts out, let us see what he got. Show me what you got type situation. And I believe we're going to like it. I really believe that we're about to be doing good with DC. DC Rises, the official hashtag of the future of DC is hashtag DC Rises. Put it in the comment section. Make sure you put it on Instagram and Twitter, because DC is rising just as predicted. I didn't predict it this way, this whole James Gunn coming in there and just blowing things away. But based off what he said, along with the chaotic moves that he's made, I can see that he's doing it for the better of DC, and that's all that someone like me could ask for. I ask that you guys just give this man a chance. There's been a lot of negativity out there and stuff that I don't want to talk about, but when James Gunn says he's not falling to the negativity of the groups, the group that he was talking about, the Snyderverse group, the toxic side, we're going to go ahead. Let's ignore that. You know what I'm saying? Some people who are part of the Snyderverse just want to see Snyder back, but we have to move on from that. At this point, if they're still calling for the Snyderverse, we're talking about just being delirious. We have to move forward after everything we've seen happening. We got to move forward as DC. And I invite Snyder fans as well to come aboard and let's unite and move forward with the hashtag DC Rises, and let's go with this James Gunn plan, at least see where it takes off from there. Because we can't critique it or end nothing until the man gets his shot. Don't down nothing unless you never tried it. Let's try this James Gunn formula and see what happens. Discord is back on Jody's Corner. Oh yes, you better believe it. It's lit and better than ever. If you guys want access, it's available to my patrons on Patreon. It's now coming out of beta, and it's going to be available to the members of Jody's Corner. And if you want to be a member, choose one of these tiers below.